Tanya, that's fantastic. I really appreciate really the presentations from each of the states. I do encourage you to submit questions if you like. However, I have a couple that we do want to talk about. I will note a couple of key points and thoughts that emerged. One is one of the handouts that we have there in the download section there does identify specific resources that can be used by any one of the states today or any others really to support this guidance and the toolkits and the information to LEAs. I do think that that's going to be one of our large focuses right now as states finalize their plans. Given the new state plan template, they may be really looking to streamline what is submitted based on what the department would like to see, and then really focus their effort and time on the implementation and guidance. So I'd like to ask any of the state presenters to talk a little bit about what you plan to do and what work you've begun on implementation guidance, if any. I know, Bob, you mentioned a toolkit, and if you want to say a few more words about that, and then I might ask Richard and Tanya and Jenna in turn.
Yeah, so the toolkit that Jason from our Title I office has been working on does provide information suggesting that communities, school districts do a needs assessment. It looks at operating preschools and how you can utilize ESSA funds for that purpose. Talks about building level programs. There's information on some transition activities with some specific examples from school districts who have been doing it in the past. There's examples of additional funding sources. We have a state preschool program, for example, and some ideas about how you might integrate ESSA funds with those state funds. So it's short, it's concise. We're hoping that it will be utilized by districts. As I mentioned before, our Title I ESSA group did bring together about 200 school district special program people all in the room to talk about the different provisions of ESSA, and I strongly recommend that if you have such an event, you make sure that you do get included. We had a PowerPoint which is included in your handouts where we ask a series of questions that I think went over well. And we also invited Linda Sullivan-Dudzik, who's the author of Making a Difference, 10 Essential Steps to Building a Pre-K-3 System, that our school districts have found very helpful in the past. So I think the next steps is to figure out a way that we can share information more at a regional level and have conversations at regions, perhaps through our educational service districts or through other means to provide information on how they can use ESSA funds for early childhood.
Thank you. I think that's extremely helpful. I think these guides and toolkits will be fantastic to share. Richard, Jenna, well, why don't we go to Richard next? Would you like to share anything about how you are have begun implementation, planning, and or thinking about doing so?
Sure. So at this point in Michigan, we've conceptualized ideas but haven't actually engaged in development of guides or implementation plans to assist LEAs in incorporation. The areas that we are thinking about, that we have mapped out for consensus across the department that we would put out guidance on, a couple are similar to what Bob mentioned in terms of encouraging, in particular, Title I Part A funds to be used for preschool, but more importantly, to leverage those funds to coordinate with any other federally funded programs as well as with state programs to maximize the use of all dollars available. So whether you blend and braid those Title I Part A funds with Head Start, or you blend and braid them with early Head Start, or you blend and braid them with a state pre-K. The one thing that I would suggest if as you develop that concept is that you don't forget about quality and standards. That when you blend and braid funds, you always want to achieve the highest standards and maintain that so that you do get the desired results you're looking for. The other piece that I don't think is readily thought about within the K-12 education community is the ESSA plan really outlines ability to cross over into HHS federally to tap into the Child Care Development Fund subsidy dollars for wraparound. And so for many programs that may be before and after school, that child care subsidy dollars are a pot that you can coordinate with that help to address more of the whole child approach, the needs of parents and families, especially those who are working, and especially in low-income communities. So those are two ideas that we are pushing. The community needs assessment piece that Bob mentioned, we'll be pushing on that. We are absolutely pushing on ensuring an understanding, as was mentioned earlier, about all providers in early childhood are feeders into local districts for enrollment. So transition plans from all provider types is essential to kickstart the differentiated student-centered support at the beginning of kindergarten. And so helping to raise awareness and understanding that a home provider, a center provider, private, public, these are all feeders into enrollment, and especially in a world of schools of choice in Michigan, as well as virtual education that kicks off in, at kindergarten in some areas. Having that established relationship with feeder early educators, that is an advantage to local districts. So these are pieces that we're thinking about for alignment and alignment and collaboration.
Okay, that's fantastic. Lori, I
Jenna, yep.
I just
want to, so two pieces for us on implementation. So I think the first of which is, putting in place a structured process by getting folks to plan, to put something on paper, to work, with the various aspects of the State Department. So kind of think about, okay, if you want to see exchange, what does that mean in terms of Y input? And so that I think will be very important. And then we'll organize, we'll help them sort of create a template and organize that planning around those 5 areas. The second, and I think that's sort of key, and then we do quarterly collaboratives in Louisiana with sort of folks across the state, in which it's not training per se, but it's when the state brings out things that we're working on. We collaborate with representatives from all of the school districts, whether that's the early childhood point people, whether that's folks who focused on standards, curriculum, and assessment, whether that's folks focused on talent. And so again, kind of using these existing forums and structures, but making sure to shift the conversation and really kind of fully integrating ESSA into it. The second piece, and it's probably sort of the least sexy of all of this, but I would encourage folks to use this idea of counting and building on the point just made around feeder patterns. Like, I've still been shocked. One of the most radical things we've done in Louisiana is just required folks to count every kid, to look at, as a community, at their Medicaid estimates, at their at-risk cohort, and their, their at-risk percentage for their K cohort, and to kind of approximate how many kids are being served, and then to work with every publicly funded provider to just count kids, October 1st and February 1st, and to share that information and to say, okay, what does this mean in terms of enrollment? What does this mean in terms of most need? What does this mean in terms of who's in quality and who's in not? And so, it's as people get into implementation, looking at what is the data that you have, what is the data that we're missing, and not to sort of discount those very simple things around really looking at, particularly with early childhood, where are the kids, who's being served, who's not. I find too often that we've arranged for a small set of kids extraordinarily high quality options, but we don't have a sense of, okay, where are the different risk brackets, where's our most, where's our sort of, poor but sort of better off than the very poor, where those that are sort of moderate income, and where are all those kids being served across that birth to 5 spectrum, knowing that the vast majority of your low and moderate income kids are going to end up in your public school system. So really encouraging people to use this as an opportunity to just look at counting kids, mapping kids, evaluating where kids are at prior to entering the formal school system.
Thank you. I think that point, reinforces a question we've actually been asked, and I think something we also know that is very important. One is that states and districts are required to report the number of children attending preschool. I do think with the focus on coordination and collaboration in ESSA, it really incentivizes, if you will, just the building of the relationships and the alliances within a community. So school districts know and school principals know where their children and their community are coming from and what ways that you can work together to have an effective transition to preschool, into kindergarten and early elementary, and then beyond. So a question we did receive that I'm going to ask perhaps Bob and others, and I know Richard would like to comment on, is what are some best practice strategies for improving and having an effective alignment and collaboration between state education or preschool agencies and school districts? So I'll turn it to Richard, and then Tanya, you may want to address this as well, and others.
So I spoke to a few of these best practice strategies, but thinking about alignment and collaboration, in particular, one of the things that has helped to build credibility for that collaboration is really showcasing the alignment between early childhood standards of quality and early learning expectations, in particular around more academic domains, more so than the social-emotional pieces, although that is growing, but to actually take an time to show alignment that early education as a field has high standards and expectations for children's learning, and that these align with those that are typically in place for kindergarten, first, second, third grade, and on up. But to show, put some resources in place, and we do have some examples in Michigan on the website that was posted that showcase alignment in early literacy, to showcase our standards are pieces that you build upon as the child grows and develops and is learning throughout pre-K to age 8 in particular. Developing more of those types of alignments to establish credibility. And that then establishes a foundation and recognition that early childhood in multiple domains are essential partners in education. So establishing those alignment documents helps to establish credibility in the K-12 community, and it also gives them concrete understanding that crosses that jargon barrier that I spoke about earlier. So that's just one example. I'll let others.
Well, thanks so much. Any of the other state folks, would you like to make any other comments on this issue?
Hi, Lori. This is Tanya. I'd love to. I totally agree with Richard. But going back to something that Jenna said, really supporting that, because that has really, I think, helped with our relationship here at the state agency level with working with local school districts. And that is being able to take data about children birth to 5 to them, or sharing that with them, both, where they are, and we have all of the data regarding pre-K children, Head Start, Child Care Development funded children, and using census how many children, or Medicaid, estimates. We actually use census for children below 200% of federal poverty and just the general population. But I mean, I think school superintendents have so appreciated not having to do all that research and somebody brings it to them, and I think it adds a great deal of credibility. And consequently, it's not just the numbers, it's also, and by the way, here's how those children are doing on assessments that are being done, and here's how they're doing as they track into the longitudinal system of just how students are doing in the K-12 world once they leave pre-K and Head Start and child care. So I just think using data is a wonderful, powerful tool and helps build that relationship and really lends a great deal of credibility.
So if I could build upon, go ahead.
Yes, please do, Bob. Go right ahead.
All right, so I have 3 things on my list. One, to piggyback on that which was just said, we're sharing our kindergarten entry assessment data with school districts and also early learning providers. We've put it into Tableau, which is a tool where you can slice it and dice it. You can look at those districts that are comparable to yours and how did their kids do versus your kids. So it's a very useful interactive tool that can be used. We're also putting together feedback reports of our kindergarten data that goes back to early learning providers, and we've had a pilot on that, which worked quite well. Third, as part of that, we do have, as part of our WA Kids kindergarten assessment, a component where we ask school districts to collaborate with early learning providers. One specific thing that we've done is worked with our Child Care Aware organization here in the state, where principals and school staff can go to their site and specifically request a list of licensed child care providers within their school district. And districts and principals have found that to be useful. And then also, as I mentioned in my presentation, we have a growing number of school districts and educational service districts that are doing dinner and dialogues where you will see 50, 60, 100 early learning providers and school district staff in the room doing professional development together, professional development that they have jointly decided would be important. So there's some specifics.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. Any other comments? We have a question that was actually really important as well, was submitted. So I know a couple of folks wanted to share some ideas regarding Title IIA state level funds for early childhood. Richard, I'm going to let you kick off, and I'm going to put something in there, which is a strategy being used in Minnesota, a really fantastic strategy to engage teams from districts, including principals and early childhood folks and superintendents. I'll put that in the questions and discussion while Richard shares what Michigan may be doing in that area.
Sure. So recognizing, you know, the fact that the president's budget is a proposal, I just wanted to state to the attendees and for the purpose of this webinar that don't let, in my opinion, don't let the proposal limit your vision. You know, it has been said in a couple different ways, from Washington to Arkansas, Louisiana, and myself. All of us had plans and work in place. The ESSA state plan is a mechanism to achieve a greater outcome and vision, is how we're seeing it in Michigan. We call ours the top 10 in 10. Other states have other names for it. And we have goals. You know, again, ESSA state plan is one mechanism to achieve those goals. And so, again, I would just reinforce the supporting educators. There's joint professional learning that can occur. There are supports to teachers and principals, and recognition that early childhood providers are educators, are partners in education. And so that's where I wanted to just make a statement that it's a knee-jerk reaction to say, ooh, what do we do in this situation? I would encourage you to move forward with your vision, your ideas, globally for the state plan, more specifically for your implementation plan at the department level, at the state level, but do not let a proposal so early in the process of a federal budget limit your vision for what is best for children, what is best for the educators of those children. So that's just a statement I wanted to make.
Thank you. I would just also reiterate that we should carry, all states and locals should just carry on with their planning. This has been a great opportunity to engage with stakeholders around what's important in your state or your community. There are tons of resources that were shared today by the states and in the handouts. I do encourage you to download all the handouts. I'm going to ask us to now, I think we don't have any other questions, right? So at this point, I think we will move towards our closing. And first, I want to thank each of the state presenters that presented today. You really shared very thoughtful, informative, and I'd say inspiring approaches, if you will, and strategies for how we prioritize young learners, remembering that it really isn't a requirement in most cases to address children birth to third grade, and in some regards we sometimes feel like the early grades are the invisible grades. However, we all know what's kind of the right thing to do and what matters, and so we really applaud you as leaders, truly leading the way to embed early learning in the ESSA plan. For those of you on the call, there are still many, many opportunities to influence your own state and local communities, ESSA plan, and just education. There are lots of resources that looks like Janice is sharing right now on the REL Southwest website. And in a minute, you'll see the CEELO resources. I would encourage you to, again, check that out or contact us with any questions that you might have. We know there were a lot of different folks on the call that play different roles in educating all of our children. So we do thank you very much for being with us today, and I'll turn it over to, well, first let me check in with the states. Did you have any other closing comments, anything that you wanted to say that you didn't get a chance to say so far? And with that, I'll turn it then to Janice to close out the webinar. We do really encourage you, and please complete the stakeholder feedback survey. We really would like your honest feedback about how helpful this webinar was and ways we could improve. Thank you. Thank you so much to Janice and to Jackie, fantastic partners, and for putting our heads together and our expertise together to offer this webinar nationally.
You're welcome, and thank you as well. What a great panel this afternoon. This was a lot of wonderful information. As you mentioned, the REL website information is on the screen. A list of CEELO resources are available for you. Please take a moment to check those out. One last reminder, there are handouts for each of the presentations as well as a comprehensive list of resources in the handouts section. We'll leave that link active. And finally, before we close, or two things, excuse me, but before we go, please follow us on Twitter. Both CEELO and REL Southwest are active on Twitter, and we'd love to see you there too. And lastly, please take a moment to complete the survey for us. We would really appreciate your feedback. And with that, we will close out today's webinar, and thank you all once again for being a part of our afternoon. We hope this was helpful to you. Take care, everyone.